Salutations, one and all, and welcome to RWBY Revisited. In this installment, let's break down the showdown between Neo, Cinder, and Team RWBY, featuring Jaune, Penny, and Winter in the Pocket Dimension in Season 8. So as we do, let's take a look at the objective of everyone here. Team RWBY, along with Jaune and Penny, have three major objectives here. Firstly, the entire reason that they are in this location at all is to evacuate the population of Mantle and Atlas, getting them away from Salem. This means that they must be more cautious about how they engage their enemies, as they can't have civilians getting caught in the crossfire. Second, they need to keep the Relic of Creation away from Cinder, as well as reacquire the Relic of Knowledge. Because, as we know, if Salem wins this match of Connect 4, then that's game over for Remnant. Finally, while the powers of the Winter Maiden are no longer useful for opening Atlas's vault, Cinder gaining access to them would be a power buff to her that no one needs, and that would result in the current Winter Maiden, Penny, dying, which would be decidedly less than ideal. Cinder herself has two objectives. Foremost, she must obtain the relics for Salem, as her standing with her mistress has been on shaky ground of late. She needs to reaffirm her position, lest she be deemed more trouble than she's worth. But her own objective is to steal the powers of the Winter Maiden, furthering her obsession with gaining raw physical power. The vault has been opened and the relic removed, so Salem wouldn't care about the powers anymore, but this is Cinder's personal objective. The civilians mean nothing to Cinder, but they can be an asset for her, as Team RWBY is trying to save them after all. Finally, Neo is a separate player in this conflict, though our main cast doesn't know it. She's been working with Cinder, but her objective is her own, and that is to kill RWBY for her perceived murder of Roman Torchwick. Nothing else matters for her, not Salem or the fate of Remnant. I would be surprised if she cared in the slightest about any of that. We could call into question how and why she has chosen the path that she has taken, but that is neither here nor there. While not hostile to Cinder, she is not on the same team. But with that out of the way, let's get on to the fight. So Cinder makes the first move here, creating an explosion and sending several civilians flying off the platform and into the abyss below. I counted roughly 18 people caught in that blast. I remember hearing no shortage of people questioning why none of these individuals are in Season 9, but the reason for that is they are almost certainly dead. From how they fell, they just hung limply in the air. There was no thrashing or visible facial movement. Only cadavers would end up in the ever after. Interestingly, Robin's happy huntresses even witness this, yet contribute nothing to the ensuing fight. Team RWBY and Penny see what happened as well and move off to engage Cinder, with Blake telling Penny to continue through the portal to Vacuo, which is the best call. If things go badly here, then at least both of Cinder's objectives would be denied to her, else she must pursue Penny and leave the civilians alone. Indeed, this would probably be the best option available to our protagonists if they wanted to truly keep the population of Atlas and Mantle safe. With Penny's ability to fly and RWBY's semblance, they should make themselves known to Cinder and retreat back through two separate portals. Remember, only the main exit portal is one way. All others are two-way. Cinder, as was previously mentioned, has two objectives. One is to attain the Staff of Creation for Salem, the other is to acquire the Winter Maiden's power for herself. She will have to give chase this way. If Ruby with the staff and Penny duck back through different portals, then she'll have to choose which objective means more to her. Does she keep in Salem's good graces and snag the relic, or does she put her personal desires first and go after Penny? Now, some might say that she'll resort to attacking the civilians to coax the two of them back, but if they've already gone through the portals, then they won't be around to see that, rendering the point moot and forcing Cinder to go after one of them. As it stands, both of her objectives are in one place, and that is with Penny, right at the exit portal with the civilians. So Penny needs to either go through the exit portal or draw Cinder back into Atlas. Cinder's advantage of flight gives her the elevation advantage to see Team RWBY advancing on her, however, and she cuts them off. I'm not entirely sure why RWBY evades Cinder's flames here, as if her semblance works as described, then brief exposure to fire should have no effect on her or anyone else she's carrying with her.
The easy part ends here. How did you know about that?
RWBY moves first, though this is an extremely telegraphed attack. We don't see how Cinder responds to this, as the scene cuts away. When we come back, we have a short but sharp series of exchanges with all 4 members of Team RWBY against Cinder. RWBY delivers another obvious overhead strike, and this is deflected by Cinder, who oddly performs that X block that I hate so much. When you have 2 weapons, block or parry with one while simultaneously striking with the other. Using both to block defeats the point of dual wielding. Yang then lunges clumsily at Cinder, who only has to shift to the side to avoid being struck. Yang is lucky that she didn't blast her sister here, as her shotgun bracer goes off very close to her head. This really is poor form for Yang, as she's left completely exposed now, and RWBY has to try to cover for her, though Cinder effortlessly redirects this unwieldy attack. Yang realizes her bad positioning and leaps away with the help of her weapons, while RWBY repositions, though she could do without the twirling of her weapon. It just makes it take that much longer for you to react if your weapon is not in a ready position. Blake is the next to make a move, swinging her own blade while holding its cord for added reach. Now, in terms of the show, this is just as effective as any other attack, but if we were to look at this from our terms, then this would have almost no punch to it. You see, a flail is a flexible weapon like this sort of strike, but the head of a flail is dense, and it doesn't have an edge, so you don't need to worry about the angle your strike hits. Blake is attacking with a sword, which means that if the edge isn't aligned properly with the surface it's striking, then the blade will turn and little damage will be done. She even spins before doing this for some reason. Weiss tries to strike Cinder from above via her glyphs, but she yells out before doing so, giving away her advantage. This is going to happen several times in this fight. If your opponent doesn't realize that you're there, keep your mouth shut. Don't yell, don't taunt them, just hit them. RWBY and Blake then have a nice move of trying to attack Cinder simultaneously from opposite directions, but they were too slow to act, letting Cinder easily evade them. RWBY throws a strike in Cinder's direction, but she doesn't have the reach required to hit her. Blake attempts to leap up to attack Cinder, but again, this is easily seen coming and negated. Cinder then manages to simultaneously knock back RWBY while nullifying Weiss's ice spikes with flames before forcing all 4 of her opponents back with a wave of fire. Really, this season and the previous one hyped up Team RWBY as having improved, but this display shows little coordination or forethought put into their fighting. They are not behaving as a unit, but as individuals, not setting each other up. They are likely limiting themselves to mostly melee here to avoid catching civilians with stray attacks, but they have other abilities that they could use here. Weiss will show later that she can pull Cinder around with glyphs, so one directly beneath her would stall her for long enough for her team to attack her. RWBY could also use her own semblance to maneuver faster than what Cinder should be able to react to, or even forcibly reposition her. Yang has been portrayed as a brawler, so grappling Cinder and preventing her from using her arms to defend herself for a moment would be something that she should be capable of. As it is, it looks as though Cinder was the one to go through a Rocky-style training montage. As she is grinning the entire time, she makes all 4 of our protagonists look like chumps. She's only having to put forth the bare minimum effort to shut all of them down at once. Pyrrha alone gave her a run for her money, but now all 4 of the main cast combined can't even make her grimace.
Pyrrha.
Sometimes, if you want to win, you simply can't do it alone. RWBY!
Cinder then begins to monologue while floating in the air, which gives all of Team RWBY a firing line on her without the risk of endangering the populace. Now is the time to open fire. For that matter, why do we see no members of Atlas's military here? Did no portals open up near them? In that case, I guess they're all dead because Ambrosius gave them the finger for some reason. A few dozen soldiers with rifles would drop Cinder's aura pretty quickly, and then she would be easy pickings to take out of the sky with combined fire. But Neo takes her sweet time in approaching from an alternate angle and is walking amidst all of the panicked bystanders, making her stick out even before her very visible semblance shifting. She's behind RWBY, so our red-themed heroine can't see her as she prepares to strike, but Yang can. But then, inexplicably, this one strike from Neo, who has never been portrayed as a heavy hitter, launches Yang, who took the strike for RWBY, off her feet and breaks her aura in one hit, as well as rendering her barely conscious. How exactly did this occur, if I may ask? Some may say that Yang has been suffering from exhaustion and thus has lower than usual levels of aura. I would agree if our cast had shown any sign of weariness prior to or during this engagement. These are not the movements of people who are running on fumes. On top of this though, everyone, including Neo and Cinder, just watch this happen. Why? I get RWBY being shocked into inaction, but the villains of this story should be jumping at the chance to lay into our distracted protagonists. Neo should already be throwing her next strike at RWBY, and Cinder should be making a move for Penny, or at least looking for her if she hasn't seen her already. Yang is inconsequential to both of them. Blake then tries to catch Yang by throwing her weapon, but this fails, and Yang is now removed from the fight completely. Knockout! Did anyone else want this sort of battle to be between the main 4 against Cinder and Neo? No? Just me? because now one is gone and we'll see other characters rotated in. We then cut to Penny, who is still standing in front of the exit portal, relic in hand. So I am to believe that she was just standing here the whole time, doing exactly nothing after being told to go through. How was she not trampled by the terrified citizens? Ruby is still too stunned to act, and Neo squanders her opportunity to get a free hit on her by winding up and swinging instead of delivering a simple thrust, which her weapon is designed for. Just look at that long, thin blade. That is not intended for slashing. Ruby barely blocks this, and I do like how her body language portrays just how rocked she is by what's just happened. This is terrible form, with her practically falling over from leaning back like this as her footing is shaky. She does attempt to recover, and Neo has decided that she wants to play with her food. This strike right here is what I've been talking about when I say that scythes are terrible weapons, though. This right here is how Ruby would realistically have to attack to strike with the blade, pulling back towards herself. That would not pack much of a punch, and is easily countered or evaded. War scythes were often repurposed farming tools, and had their blades rotated so that they behaved much more like a spear, which Ruby has done on some occasions. Neo even casually shoves Ruby's head as she leaps over her, letting us know that she is toying with her. Ruby then blocks Neo's next strike, but then suffers a kick from her and is knocked out of frame. This does show how Crescent Rose is a reflection of Ruby, though. It's this monstrously oversized weapon that has almost always been shown to be effective against Grimm, with their larger size requiring more power to damage and giving most of them limited agility, but against a person, Crescent Rose is just too awkward to handle. Ruby, when first introduced, was excited to kill Grimm, but she's naive. She didn't seem to consider that she would have to go up against bandits and other evil people too, and so her weapon was not designed to deal with single combat. Meanwhile, Blake is still wailing over Yang, with Weiss having a futile attempt at getting her back in the game. There is a major conflict going on right now, and the two of you are leaving your one remaining team member hanging. Get back in the fight. I know I'm going to get ripped to shreds for saying this, but I have never cared for how rampant people have been about shipping characters in this show and in general shipping characters, and I have never found Blake and Yang to have much chemistry. Romances in a story should happen organically, which has not been the case for these two. Honestly, I believe that the show would have been better to portray the four as a sisterhood instead of having romantic involvement within the team. We are told that they're an item, but shown scant little of how or why said item came to be, and thus this lacks the punch it should have. Eventually, Blake figures out that maybe she shouldn't be doing precisely nothing of value and rushes off, though Weiss is just left glaring at Cinder. Ruby is then shown parrying another strike from Neo, then throwing out a pair of half-hearted swings at her opponent. She even winds up beforehand, letting Neo know when and where the attacks are coming from. Blake then eventually gets into the action, and this instance of her weapon being thrown does not penetrate Neo's arm, unlike what will happen later. Really? Now is the time when you choose not to have your weapon stab into something? But it was all an illusion from Neo, who is actually a short distance away. This means that Neo was projecting this illusion while fighting RWBY at the same time for some reason. I suppose she didn't trust Cinder enough to keep the others busy. This also illustrates just how out of her depth RWBY is, as her opponent can take the time to do this while fighting her at the same time. Blake then moves off to engage, but that leaves only Weiss to face Cinder, who had been handling all 4 members of Team RWBY with ease not but a moment ago.
Why'd you have to come back? Penny, no! Why didn't you just learn your lesson?
So, needless to say, these are not good odds for Weiss. So Weiss is doing her best to simply avoid Cinder's attacks, but Penny has made the worst possible decision here, choosing to engage, bringing both of Cinder's objectives right to her. Is it in character? Yes. Was it a terrible choice to make? Also yes. Somehow, Cinder was struck by this telegraphed punch from Penny, which is bizarre, given that we have a shot explicitly showing us that she sees Penny coming. I would also like to point out that while Penny may retain the powers of the Winter Maiden, she's only had this organic body for maybe half an hour. She won't be accustomed to its differences.
I did.
I do have to wonder how their ability of flight would affect their ability to face each other in melee though. If you're standing on the ground, you have an anchor point. You don't have that if you're in the air. But Penny has just realized her error. Again, this puts both of Cinder's objectives in one place, directly in front of her.
It was at this moment that he knew. He f***ed up.
Now, she doesn't have to choose, as she can get them both in one fell swoop. Cinder then blasts Penny back, who manages to recover and generates blades similar to those she possessed in her machine form. Judging by their appearance, these blades resemble obsidian. If that's the case, they're very sharp, but extremely brittle. The Aztecs were known for making blades out of this very material. Penny then flies off to re-engage, with Weiss moving off to get a better vantage. She's putting out a ton of glyphs here. That has to be taxing on her aura. Penny and Cinder continue their confrontation, and fighting in midair like this allows for vertical movement not generally possible in combat. Even in RWBY, characters can only stay airborne for a short time. Much of their back and forth involves wild sweeping slashes and blasts of flame, but Weiss pulls Cinder away, incurring her wrath. This is what I said about Weiss being able to forcibly hold Cinder in place, at least for a few moments. This is what she needs to be doing more of, if only the others would capitalize on it. But Cinder can now threaten the civilians, which is what I was getting at when I mentioned a strategy that Team RWBY could have used. If you want to keep the people safe, then you should have forced Cinder to chase you as you head away from them. Now Cinder can blast obsidian shards at extreme velocity towards them, which Weiss only barely blocks with the sword of her Arma Gigas, though many shards do still go through the entrance portal, nearly eviscerating some more people and alerting Jaune that something is horribly wrong. These shards then explode, to which Weiss has no available counter, launching her away, though she saves herself with another glyph. Penny was too slow to act though, and Cinder is able to evade her pinwheel of blades, and the two resume their pseudo dogfight. When we cut back to Ruby and Blake against Neo, Blake has managed to get between the two, though she's still using her tethered blade technique, which is slow and easy to see coming, and Neo has little trouble countering this. She then kicks Neo, though this isn't enough to give Ruby an opening, as her strike is blocked, though I do like how Ruby has shifted her weapon into its war scythe configuration. I like that a lot. This is much better suited for almost every situation. But Crescent Rose's size means that it is not nimble, and Neo parries her thrust and evades her swipe, and Ruby can't seem to counter quickly enough to capitalize on her exposed back. But Blake then catches sight of Penny struggling against Cinder, and now she has a choice. Does she help Ruby or Penny? Penny is the VIP, and she has the staff as well, meaning that if she loses, Cinder accomplishes both of her goals. But Ruby stands little chance against Neo, as we can clearly see that Neo is still just playing with her, relishing that she has the upper hand. This would very likely result in a second member of her team dying, or at least she believes that Yang is dead anyway. Ultimately, the objective has to come first though. That's the weight that anyone who willingly undertakes the role of huntsman or huntress must accept. The bigger picture is worth more than yourself and any of you as individuals. We then cut to Penny and Cinder, with the former mostly taking evasive action while the latter pursues. Again, Cinder has no reason to care about Team RWBY. It might be satisfying for her to hurt them if she gets the chance. But remember that the staff and maiden powers are the real priorities for her. Penny, in her desire to help her friends, has put both of those right in front of her.
He's there! It's right there!
And this isn't me speaking ill of her. She and Pyrrha were my favorite characters, but her confronting Cinder was the worst choice that she could have made here.
Priority 1.
But she's given aid in the form of Weiss atop a summoned Lancer. I do have to wonder where Weiss intends to actually go, as they sort of drift about aimlessly, but we do see that Jaune and Nora are keeping to their own objective of escorting the civilians, because this is realistically what you would need to do in this sort of scenario. Remember that the populace was not informed of the main cast's plan to evacuate them, and thus there are going to be many people who do not know what's going on, and could remain in Atlas or Mantle, which would be a death sentence.
All she's ever wanted is the maiden power. I can buy you all time.
Penny.
And Penny does bring up here that Cinder desires the maiden power, which could be used as a distraction. It's a bit late for this, but it does go back to what I was saying about dividing Cinder's objectives and forcing her to choose between them. Ultimately, it would be best for Remnant if she went after Penny and failed to get the staff, as the powers, while it would be a buff to her, do not further Salem's objective of ending the world. Really, they should attempt to bail Ruby out so that she can retreat with the staff, and Penny can either keep Cinder busy or flee in a different direction. But the pair are knocked out of the sky before they can discuss this further, and it highlights the point I made earlier. Penny is not going to be used to a human body, and thus won't be accustomed to the sensations that come with it, meaning that she doesn't know how to recover from being concussed and fly off like she probably would have done before.
I'm right here. I'm what you want.
I want it all.
Cinder is then blindsided by Blake, though I have to question how she ended up here. This place has such a wonky layout that it's difficult to discern which paths lead where, and where everything is in relation to everything else. Blake at least had the sense to stay quiet until she struck though, so points for that. Most other characters in this engagement can't stop themselves from screaming like deranged howler monkeys.
Get up!
And finally, Cinder's objectives are divided. Penny and Blake are confronting her, while Weiss makes off with the Relic of Creation. Still, she handled all of Team RWBY without breaking a sweat, and Penny thus far has not put up a good showing against her in this fight, so that may not be enough. We then shift back to RWBY and Neo, with Ruby's attacks against the latter involving more twirling of her weapon than necessary, which gives Neo ample opportunity to see them coming. Neo's movements vaguely remind me of my instructor in my martial arts classes. He never had any wasted movement and never showed any signs of strain or distress, even when sparring a skilled opponent. He almost looked lazy in the way he casually moved, but that was all deception and energy conservation. Most people would have better luck trying to hit a fly with a sledgehammer than to get a clean hit on him. RWBY then does this baffling move where she brings her weapon around her body twice before spinning it behind herself, then throwing it at Neo, who does not even have to move to avoid it, then dashing off with her semblance to catch it once it's on Neo's other side. Neo's expression says it all here. What was this? What was the plan?
What?
Whatever it was certainly a flop. That attack was easy to see coming and trivial to avoid, and it only served to expend energy. Neo then uses the momentum of RWBY's own attack as leverage to kick her in the back of the head.
Ain't that a kick in the head?
RWBY has not had a good showing here. One could argue that she's off her game due to believing that her sister is dead, but dwelling on that mid-combat will result in your death as well. Mourn after, not during. Letting your emotions get the better of you is a surefire way to lose. It's one reason why samurai helms often had masks, called menpo. You can't tell if the man behind it was enraged, intimidated, or completely collected. At least not by his face.
Leave her alone!
But Neo does the Michael Myers tactic of just walking as slowly as possible to her target, which gives Weiss the chance to attack her. Though again, she calls out before striking, and is lucky that Neo didn't react in time. I'm also not a fan of Weiss's form on this strike. Having your weapon, in this case the staff, held out behind and to the side of your body doesn't give you good leverage, especially against something with the mass of a person. You could bring up cavalry charges, and Weiss is doing something similar here, but those were made to deliver strikes, not fling an enemy, and even then, the blow was delivered more to the front or side of the rider, not almost behind them. Cinder is able to witness this, indicating that Penny and Blake are not able to put up enough of a fight to keep Cinder busy. And she casually swats the two of them aside, with Penny being forced to divert to keep Blake from falling. This does tell us that Cinder, at least for the moment, is choosing to prioritize the staff over the maiden powers, showing us that she, of all characters, has had some growth.
Do this for Ye.
Cinder creates an explosion beneath Weiss and RWBY, though the former is able to shove the latter out of its radius and pass her the staff. That was some quick thinking there, but tackling her forward would have saved you as well, and now Weiss has no aura, leaving her vulnerable. Neo has also recovered, and Ruby only barely manages to parry her thrust. Again though, Crescent Rose is a cumbersome weapon, and certainly not designed to be used one-handed, letting Neo counter Ruby's spinning attack. And I really like how she forced it into the ground. Very nice way of gaining control over an opponent's weapon. The front flip kick was a tad excessive, but it did its job of stunning Ruby long enough for Neo to knock the relic from her grasp. While Neo probably couldn't care less about the relics or Remnant, she does know that Ruby cares about them, leading to her using that as a distraction. As Ruby gawks up at the staff, Neo strikes her, and Ruby nearly tumbles off the walkways entirely, though Crescent Rose is now gone. I would also like to point out that there are now almost no civilians near the entrance portals, indicating that just about everyone who is going to come through has already done so.
I hope it was worth it.
Somehow, Neo is on the same bridge as Ruby when we cut back to this, and I hate when media does this sort of thing, when characters are in completely different positions after a cutaway. I want to see what happened. Ruby does a nice fake here, pretending to throw herself to her demise to get Neo to overextend, who wants the pleasure of ending her herself, only to use her semblance to strike her from behind and force her to cling to the ledge. Unfortunately, Cinder can fly, and Blake and Penny were not up to the task of keeping her busy, and so she can blast Ruby off the walkway as well. But Cinder is as vindictive as ever, and uses this opportunity to dispose of Neo, now that she has outlived her usefulness. Really, what did you think would happen, Neo? You've made one terrible choice after another, and this is what it's led you to. Blake and Penny attempt to save Ruby, and I must wonder if Neo registered that no one wanted to save her. Blake tries to tether the pair of them to the walkway, and I really want to know what this is made out of. It's firm enough to not buckle or give when many people are on it, but soft enough for a thrown blade to sink into it. Also, why is this place a series of floating platforms over an abyss to the ever after? Ambrosius was directed to make this a place similar to the vaults, but the two we've seen don't even remotely resemble this space. Cinder makes Blake pay for such an obvious maneuver, burning the cord of her weapon and sending her and Ruby to the depths. And now they are gone from this fight as well, leaving Weiss as the only remaining member of her team.
Another one bites the dust.
What's more, Cinder now has the staff, and Penny is still in her sights.
Get back!
Meg, Joanna, any huntsman that went through that gate, bring him here!
Weiss has taken Gamble's shroud, though, meaning that it must have struck the platform where Neo had fought Ruby, or Weiss had been making her way towards this area when this happened. She fires at Cinder, though these projectiles do little more than annoy the Fall Maiden. Jaune then tells Nora to bring any huntsman back who went through the exit, which lets us know that they all simply bailed at the first sign of danger. This was the crew you picked, Robin? Not exactly lion-hearted, are they?
Letting all her friends die first.
You wouldn't know anything about friends.
Weiss is then shown being flung about like a cat would a mouse, and is saved from a blast of flame by Penny. The exchange of dialogue here is reflecting the fact that Cinder has no one who cares about her, but the message is a bit hollow when she's decimated your group. Jaune squanders his opportunity for a surprise attack by bellowing like a wildebeest in heat and only manages to push Cinder away momentarily. We get some guitar riffs and a shot of Jaune, Penny, and Weiss lining up against Cinder, but Cinder was able to take on all of Team RWBY with scantily more effort than yawning, and Weiss has no aura now. This is not in their favor at all. But Cinder unleashes an area blast with her power, and it might have been handy if Penny had done the same at any point previously. She used quite a few tricks against the Aesops, but utilized none of them in this fight. But Cinder is able to isolate Penny and deliver a fatal strike, as Penny was too distracted to see it coming. Never take your eyes off your enemy. You have to trust that your allies can take care of themselves. Again, it's in character for her, but still a mistake. And so this show killed off another of my favorite characters for a second time. You see, it's easy to kill a character. In doing so, you don't need to develop their story or interactions with others or the world. They simply come to a stop. Game of Thrones was notorious for this. Perhaps the books are better, but the show enjoyed killing characters simply for the shock value. This negates the entire purpose of having Penny avoid death due to Watts' virus not but a few minutes prior. That would have set a precedent that we should have seen how she developed by having an organic body as opposed to being a machine. But here, she was killed simply to tug at the heartstrings. More than that, if you are going to bring a character back from death as she was, then there should be some narrative significance for it. What was accomplished by bringing Penny back? She held on to the Winter Maiden powers for a few days. Wasted potential.
She can't get the staff.
Weiss then engages Cinder alone, and Cinder bats aside her strike, though both overswing here. Weiss, you have, at least for the moment, the advantage of two weapons. Swinging wildly like this makes it so that you can only use one weapon at a time. Get your head in the game. Weiss then horribly overshoots her mark again, leaving her back completely exposed while she has no aura. Remember when you got impaled? This is how that happens again, if Cinder had been quicker on the uptake. Weiss then blocks an attack from Cinder, then winds back with the same weapon to strike instead of riposting with the other. This is slow enough for Cinder to evade, then strangely hurl one of her weapons at Weiss, before delivering a telegraphed leaping strike before driving into her.
Weiss will give us time.
The two then meet strike to strike, and we see that Weiss is not in her element here. She's frantic. Though she may have been able to shoot Cinder with Gamble's Shroud here, or at the very least deliver a thrust with her own weapon, whose name I would likely butcher. Instead, she's backpedaling and does the dreaded X block, and Cinder could have easily ended her right here with a thrust from her other weapon, while both of Weiss's were otherwise occupied. If you have two weapons, then use two weapons, not just one then the other. Cinder then brings both weapons down from the same direction, which should have been a simple thing to deflect for Weiss, but she's panicking and loses her hold on Gamble's Shroud. Cinder even toys with her by letting her watch it fall before delivering a less than lethal pommel strike. Hearing Jaune call out, though, Cinder realizes that he just mercy-killed Penny, and the Winter Maiden powers have just slipped away. Enraged, she flies towards him, without any weapon, likely blinded by her wrath. Jaune thankfully uses his shield, something that is often ignored by many other movies and shows, before using it to blast her away via dust. Jaune's sword is then broken by a telegraphed strike from Cinder. Either he has not maintained it properly, or Cinder's weapon is hot enough to weaken its integrity enough to break. No, I do not accept symbolism as a reason for steel breaking. Cinder takes another swipe at him, and Jaune falls to the ground in his confusion. I would also like to mention that this is the first time he's been face to face with her since Haven. His short showing was a bit better here, but nobody put up much of a fight against her here. Winter, now with the powers of the Winter Maiden, has entered this space to confront Cinder. Winter as the Winter Maiden. Not exactly subtle, is it? About as discreet as a brick through a windshield. The two then meet in the air, with their initial strikes intercepting each other before Winter manages to block Cinder's attack with one hand. Without the ability to drive with your legs, this might not be as difficult as it seems though. Winter, despite gaining these powers mere moments ago though, seems more adept with them than Penny, unleashing elemental blasts that Penny did not. Winter then uses her signature move of conjuring miniature Nevermore, and Cinder shoots many down, though the remainder just orbit her, doing absolutely nothing. This is not set up for a following attack, as Winter simply watches. If the goal was to buy time for Weiss to escape, then a follow-up attack would have been a much better option. Cinder then destroys these Nevermore before re-engaging Winter. Winter does manage to knock the Staff of Creation from Cinder, though the latter catches sight of Jaune hobbling Weiss towards the exit. Good sir, if you are going to quit the field and Weiss cannot run, then you need to sling her over your shoulder and run yourself. Your only feasible option is to fireman carry her out. Even Princess carrying her would be better than this. You don't have the time to limp her out of here. She's rather petite, you can manage that. Cinder unleashes a fireball towards the pair, and Jaune does have some nice quick thinking by throwing his shield to let it take the blast instead. Unfortunately, Cinder can create explosions remotely, and this sends Weiss flying off the walkway, though Jaune does not, given his increased mass and weight of his equipment. And thus Weiss follows her team into the abyss, with Winter failing to save her. I will say that the last time the two of them met face to face was when Winter was fully prepared to betray her just because Ironwood said so. She didn't stop to think about why or how her sister could have been put under arrest, and she was willing to do it just because she was told to. Now realize that she believes she just saw her sister die after said betrayal. That must be a devastating realization, and all the guilt would be entirely earned. Remember, don't turn on those who are supposed to be your family or friends unless you discover that they have actually acted against you, or you are the bad guy. But Cinder has obtained the relic, and upon hearing Salem, who can somehow affect this dimension slightly, realizes that she's out of time and turns tail, ending this fight. Though Cinder utilizes the staff's power to disperse this pocket dimension, and Jaune ends up plummeting into the maw of darkness, with Winter only realizing as she passes through that she left him to die as well. Also, that is not the run of a man fleeing for his life. That is the pace of someone out for an afternoon run. Pick up the pace, your life depends on it. But overall, this fight was a mixed bag. Cinder had quite the impressive showing, handling everyone but Winter with extreme ease, and even then, it was only on equal terms. Yang was knocked out almost immediately, Ruby floundered against Neo, and Blake was an emotional wreck. Weiss put up some good moments, but didn't perform as well as she could have. But what did you think of this fight? Leave your thoughts in the comments below, leave a like on this video if you're so inclined, and subscribe to see more. I would like to thank you for watching, and may you all have a weapon in each hand.